Okay. I want you guys to think about this with me for a minute. Well, first of all, let me see, show of hands. How many of y'all are parents? Okay, almost the whole room. And how many of you have influenced in one way or another a child?
I'm a child.
You are! This is awesome. At what age did you tell your child it was okay to call other children names? I know you're Johnson Danger. At what age did you tell your child it was okay to call other people names? At what age, if you don't have children, do you think it's okay to tell your child it's okay to call other people names? Right. Let me read you some names. Shillery, Heil Hillary, Killary, Hillary Rotten Clinton, Drumpf, Cheeto, Agent Orange, Lord Voldemort, Terrible Ted, Ted Screws, Crazy Bernie, Libtards, Republicans. At what point did we start believing it was okay to do the things that we tell our children not to do? I'm mad about this. And I'm mad because it breaks my heart. So I want to call us to the angels of our better nature. I want to call us to the higher ground. And I hope that I say something in the next 20 or so minutes that aids you in that. So my first question about that, actually what I wrote is, what the hell? But really what, or rather what age are we thinking? I want to talk to sort of outline something that most of our educators and many other people who have ever taken a survey class in psychology already know. Okay, so this is a developmental theory that comes from a fellow by the name of Piaget. And what he said is that the sophistication of human thinking emerges in stages. And I want to talk to you about something called the concrete operations stage. It's a really necessary stage. It's the stage at which, okay, think about it, concrete operations. So, you know, you've seen the video clips where if you have a tall glass with water and a short glass that's empty and you pour it from one to the other, little kids think that, oh, there must be more water in the taller one. Have y'all seen that? Okay. It's because they can't hold the volume of water as a constant. So the glass is taller, it must hold more. That happens at the pre-operational stage. And then what emerges is something called concrete operations. And it's the very thing that allows us to do math, to reverse things. It's a very necessary and right stage of cognitive development. So that's why we can learn math. That's why we can learn rules of grammar. There's a lot of great things about the concrete operational stage. But here's the thing. It's very concrete. And our thinking in that stage is very black and white. And I don't mean that racially. I mean in every way. There's this and there's this. And our logic, our reasoning, goes from, we can do what's called inductive reasoning. So from a specific, we can generalize, but we can't go the other direction. Okay. So the thing about this is this happens in children, at least in industrialized nations, between the ages of 7 and 11. So there's good and there's bad. And that's why there's this, there's superheroes and there's all of the things that appeal to that stage of thinking. The thing is that along about the age of 12, what we want to happen is something beyond that called formal operational thinking. And that means that you can actually abstract. You can hypothesize. There's some added sophistication that comes in. Now, when Piaget did this work, he originally thought that essentially all of us progressed from concrete operations to formal operations. And that's where we spent our adulthood. Unfortunately, he did his original research in Geneva on a very limited and, you could say, elite, educated, come from educated homes, group of people. The reality is that somewhere between 35 and 50% of the American public operates at concrete operations. On both sides of the political spectrum. So not only do we run our mouths as if we are 7 to 11-year-olds on a playground with no supervision, we think like it too. You see it in the political system. You see it in race relations. You see it anywhere where there's where black and white thinking is pervasive. So the American body politic, including you and I sometimes, are operating like 7 to 11-year-olds. I guarantee you that 7 to 11-year-olds cannot solve the complexity of issues that we are faced as a nation or as a planet. I want to read you a quote from a teacher friend of mine named Jim Lockhart. So what are our options as good students of New Thought philosophies? How should we relate to the political nature of our civic lives? As I see it, we have two choices. Participate in the process or don't. But I want to be clear, Jim says. Both are political actions. You can't say I don't do politics because silence is a political statement. Don't do it. Don't vote. Don't look. Don't do anything. And we have a significant number of people in New Thought that do this. Oh, I'm too spiritual for politics. You laugh, but it's significant. Or do participate. The thing is, we can't participate in the way that things are going. So let me say this. You know, in any culture at any time, and there is there's something we call center of gravity. So how is the mass culture operating? What's the center of gravity? Okay, right now the center of gravity in the political arena is concrete operational thinking, maybe, maybe not. But it's people acting like schoolyard bullies. I don't want to participate that way. So what we have to do is look at another way to participate. And unfortunately, or fortunately for us, as my friend Jim points out, we are called to higher and higher consciousness because right now we're seeing the center of gravity go down. So in order to, live as like adults in the world, we already have to come up from the center of gravity of what seems to be happening. If we want to act as spiritually mature adults that live our spiritual principles, the gap is more. But see, the thing about a center of gravity is it pulls everything toward it. So it's like the last temptation of the metaphysicians or something. I don't know how else to say it. It's like it's like this thing, it's drawing us down and it's so tempting. But the world is run by people that show up, so we have to show up. We must decide how we're going to show up. What's the line from the song, Candace? One of us must make the peace. This came from an article in the New Yorker Online by George Saunders. Intellectually and emotionally weakened by years of steadily degraded public discourse, we are now two separate ideological countries, left land and right land, speaking different languages, the lines between us down. Not only do our two sub-countries reason differently, they draw upon non-intersecting data sets and access entirely different mythological systems. Okay, here's where he makes that really concrete. You and I approach a castle. One of us has watched only Monty Python and the Holy Grail. The other only Game of Thrones. What is the meaning, the collective we of yon castle? We have no common basis from which to discuss it. You, the other night, strike me as bafflingly ignorant, a little unmoored. In the old days, a liberal and a conservative, a dove and a hawk, say, got their data from one of 3 nightly news programs, a local paper, and a handful of national magazines, and were thus starting with the same basic facts, even if those facts were questionable, limited, or wrong. Now each of us constructs a custom informational universe. Wittingly, we choose to go to the sources that uphold our existing beliefs and thus flatter us. Or unwittingly, our app algorithm does the driving for us. The data we get in this way is pre-imprinted with spin and mythos and intensely one-dimensional. Do you see how there is an entire different reality for somebody in a different place? I want to... This is the image I want you to really hold about this. I'm going to go back and read it again, because sometimes humor and irony stay with us longer than these really sophisticated quotes. You and I approach a castle. One of us has watched only Monty Python and the Holy Grail, the other only Game of Thrones. What is the meaning to the collective we of yon castle? Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Okay, so now I want to tell you a story. And some of you guys have heard me say this before. It's stayed with me. About 3 years ago, maybe, I was watching PBS. I was watching a program on climate change. And they were interviewing a woman in western Kansas. So she's out in the middle of wheat fields. Older Caucasian woman on a farm in a wheat field with the neighbors a long way away. And she said she didn't believe in climate change. She didn't believe in global warming. What was her reason? Her weather had not changed. Her weather had not changed. Okay, so there's concrete operational thinking. My weather hasn't changed, therefore, I've generalized this. It's not possible the weather is changing because my weather hasn't changed. Right? Now I want you to think about the fact that this woman probably doesn't, the town maybe's got 800. I don't know. She is exposed to her family and people that think like her. She doesn't have a ton of neighbors. She doesn't deal with any kind of city congestion, anything. But then she has this little box called a TV and maybe a computer. And what's getting piped into her home are images. Images of war, images of Muslims, images of destruction, images of catastrophe. Now, she doesn't believe in climate change because her weather hasn't changed. What is a mind like that to make of all of this inundation? You see, it makes sense how we got ourselves into this mess in some ways. But jumping in and participating is never, it's not going to change it. And it doesn't matter if they started it. Because do you tell your kids it's okay to call people names if they've been called a name? Do you tell your kids that it's okay to bully or dehumanize someone who doesn't think like them or look like them or act like them? In a lot of our culture, we hold up this guy, Jesus of Nazareth, as the master teacher. And maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But one of the things that stuck to me from my childhood, just, there's very little that actually stayed with me from Catholicism except the guilt. But one of the things that stayed is forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. See, we think they must know how ridiculous their views are. But they're not even looking at the same picture as us. Ernest Holmes says we can not only embrace ourselves, somehow our arms must find themselves around the shoulders of all humanity. That's what we teach, right? Unity? Oneness? It doesn't mean that we can love without agreeing. This is from a 1955 talk by Ernest Holmes called "The Power That Heals." And again, it's a bit of a long reading. Let me see if I can cut it down a little bit. No, I can't. All right. Now, if God is love, which I most certainly believe, and you do too, then there is a principle or a presence of love in everyone and everything, which automatically responds to us at the level which we view it. But from the human viewpoint, there are levels of antagonism, hatred, animosity, and enmity. These will not exist to the individual that does not resist them. Okay. So here's what I want to say. Here's how Holmes says it. Nonviolence, non-resistance, from the standpoint of Gandhi and Jesus, is not a process where they agreed to stop at the level of the discord. It was a non-resistance to the discord in order that they might transmute it by an interior awareness of transcendence. Now let me say that, let me read you the way that Buckminster Fuller says the exact same thing. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Build a new model. which for us, because we believe in new thought and ancient wisdom, we actually realize it's the original model. There's nothing new about it. Now, the application of it might be new, or new in our, well, it might be brand new over the last couple thousand years. It's just kind of been forgotten altogether. We are all of us the sons and daughters of the One. We are all expressions of the One. And it is so easy to forget that. It is so easy to get caught up in the, I can't believe he thinks that way, she thinks that way. It's so easy to start there. And then where that goes is, they must be stupid. They're ignorant. They're uneducated. See, we come up with these things and they become the other. And the more they become the other, the more it is okay to treat them as less than human. And the more it is okay to treat them as less than human, the more violent in thought, word, and deed we become. But we're not called to that. We're not called to do unto others as they're doing unto us. We are called to live an ideal, a greater possibility. We're called to live our spiritual truth. And I know that everybody in this room, deep down, doesn't need any kind of spiritual literature or anything else to know the truth. The trick is not to forget. When it gets scary and ugly and visceral and vicious, it's so tempting. But it doesn't help. And we're creating an energy of discord, of polarity. I don't want us to do that. I want us to be the change we want to see. I want us to be called to something higher. So what does this mean for the political season in a very concrete way? With a deep debt of gratitude to, once again, my friend and teacher, Jim Lockhart, I'm going to read to you some affirmations he suggests for the political season. Now, he's calling these affirmations, but that's a little bit of a misnomer. What he's doing is giving you a code of conduct if you choose to accept it. And some of this may resonate with you, some of it may not. I think if we could all do a couple of them, we'd be in much better shape than we're in right now. I also want to let you know that I will share this on the HeartSpace Facebook page and my own Facebook page this afternoon. So if you want to see it, print it, Mod Podge it onto your front door. I mean, make a street sign, tattoo it on the inside of your eyelids, anything. Okay, so affirmations / let's just call them affirmations. That sounds really a lot more voluntary. I only post to social media things that speak to what I am for, and only in a way that does not denigrate anyone else or their beliefs, remembering that disagreement is not denigration. I only post things that I have researched and reasonably believe to be accurate, not just anything that appears to justify my position. I scroll right by any negative or degrading posts about any candidate, whether they are my candidate or not. I am not responsible for changing anyone's mind. And you know that research shows that you actually can't. When you try to change someone's mind with facts, you further entrench them into your position. I speak my truth in political discussions, but I monitor my emotional self and stay in a sense of love, appreciation, and compassion. That's a tough one. Maybe we should just say, I speak my truth in political discussions, but I monitor my emotional self, period. Letty's a black belt. If I depart an online or an offline political discussion because it devolves into name-calling or other negativity, I will share the following. I am leaving this discussion for my own well-being, as I choose to be in a place of discourse where all parties are treated with respect. I study the candidates and the issues, using as many sources as possible, including those that have different opinions than my own. I am accountable for what I post and how or whether I vote. I choose to participate in the political process. I support that which is closest to what I believe in. I want to say about that, because remember, we left the land for those of us aspiring to live this principle, this way of life, this positive, practical spirituality. We left the land of this or that, the black or white thinking. We left it a while back. So our candidates aren't perfect. And theirs aren't wholly evil. Everybody's somewhere in the middle. I hold the highest possible vision for the governance of the world, my nation, my state, and my local jurisdictions. I remain open-minded and willing to give up a position where there is sufficient evidence to the contrary, or when my intuitive knowing clearly points in a different direction. How many of you are old enough to remember Happy Days? Okay, try this. Say this with me. I was wrong. Good. I do my spiritual practices every day to reinforce my success at living up to these affirmations. That's Jim Lockhart's list. This is what I'm going to do my best to do. It doesn't mean that I'm not, we teach basically one thing, and that's that what you tend to focus on grows. What I'm asking you to do is think about where you're placing your focus. Think about where you're placing your focus. Where your attention goes, energy flows. It comes down to something as simple as that. Let's pray. I'm just so hearing that phrase from Ralph Waldo Emerson, the better angels of our nature. As we awaken to our identity as sons and daughters, as children of the precious, holy, everywhere present one, we awaken to choice. We awaken to the idea that we are actually co-creating the worlds that we live in. At the community level, at the local level, at the national level, at the state level, at the planetary level. What I remember is that this place, HeartSpace Spiritual Center, and everyone that it touches, everyone in a chair today, is a spiritual innovator in the world. That we go forth into our lives in order to be a beneficial presence, in order to be a center of gravity that pulls people up into a place of empowerment, into a place of peace, into a place of possibility. And we don't do this in a Pollyanna way. We don't pretend that there's stuff that doesn't need to change. We don't give up our ability to act in the world for the causes close to us. Justice, life, all of the things that matter. But what I know and what I affirm is that it's not just what we do, it's the spirit with which we do it. So what I see and know for every person in here is that they are leaving here today remembering what it's like to model the power and presence of God. Each person goes forth to remember that they are created in the image and likeness of the One. We can ask ourselves, what would Jesus do? What would Gandhi do? But ultimately, that indwelling spirit that is the truth of the divine throughout the ages is actually whispering to us right here and right now. And we know. We know what it's like to take up the good and be it where we go. And so for this wisdom, this truth, this knowing, and so much more, I am grateful. And so it is.
Oh.